Yeah, all right. You should be able to see my screen. Let me see if I can do it as a you present. Okay, everyone sees my screen. So thank you, everybody, on this excellent Veterans Day. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rick Maher. I'm the CEO of Turning Point Human Capital Management. Also, you'll see Eileen Coloretti. She's one of our team members. I have asked her to be a part of this, to take any notes, or if there's any specific questions or things that pop up, we'll jump through it. So my intention is that will be about 15 minutes of this, and then open it up to questions. And I see Gary's on the line, and Gary's also a terrific resource. So I invite Gary, please jump in on anything, or ask either one of us. Happy to have everyone here. So John, Fred, Murray, team, thank you for inviting me. What we're going to talk about today is understanding New York State sexual harassment law. It's been in effect for quite some time, and so we're going to go through that. So, who is Turning Point Human Capital Management? So we're a small business on Long Island. We are servicing clients nationwide. That's been a leap that we've made, and COVID and Zoom has helped exacerbate and help us move across the country. And in tribute to our veterans, I'd like to, this logo that you see here, first responders, veterans, and families. This logo is on the bottom of every one of our emails that goes out at Turning Point Human Capital Management, and it's been that way for probably over a year now. So it's important that I wanted to make sure that we as a company recognize the sacrifices that people make for us in all different walks of life. And particularly on this Veterans Day, just want to share thanks and gratitude to folks who've done the things that they've done for all of us. So I appreciate that. So the companies we serve. So I started the company in 2010, and really what our tagline is we solve the HR problems that keep business owners awake at night. And clearly, this, let's put sexual harassment, it could be termed a problem, it could be termed a lot of different things, but all in all, it's something that every business owner has to deal with by mandate of New York State law. So we'll go through that. So the companies that we serve, so we've worked with over 1,000 small businesses. It's actually closer to 1,100 small businesses since 2010. And all those businesses are first or second generation family businesses with, a handful to several hundred employees, right? We have some really micro businesses, and we have some really large business with thousands of employees, but the average is, in that space. And those businesses that we're working with are typically doing something on the order of a million to 100 million in revenue. And the problems that we solve for those companies fall into really four buckets of categories: compliance and employee issues, right? So those almost come together in this presentation. So, every from a compliance perspective, every day there's some new law, rule, or regulation that is, designed to protect employees, but also put some onus on employers, and that's important. That's kind of where this law stands. The second are employee issues. Everything from hiring properly to firing properly, to why can't Susie get to work on time, and why is Johnny harassing everybody, right? That sort of thing. So compliance and employee issues in this presentation kind of go together. This next bucket of problems that we solve are policies and procedures. So think of things like handbooks and job descriptions and sexual harassment training and all those things that protect the business, but also would allow it to grow it profitably. And again, those policies and procedures, we're going to talk about that further on in the presentation, really are, directly tied into the New York State sexual harassment law. And then finally, strategic challenges, right? So how do we get the right people on the boat rowing in the right direction all at the same time? So the organizational development kind of stuff. So those are the kinds of problems we solve. And just as a note, since this law came into effect, we have trained over 12,000 employees on New York State sexual harassment since the law's inception. So we've really made a push to make sure that companies are getting this training and so on and so forth. So it's, it's a number that we're really proud of. It's a pretty big number, so we're pretty excited about that. So that's who we are. Um, so what is the law, right? So, as you can see here, really, this law went into effect in April of 2018. That's when it was passed. Now, we're focused, just as a side note, we're focused on the New York State law. New York City also passed a similar law, but New York State supersedes it. There's some more restrictions and things. So just for purposes of this conversation, we're Long Island, so we're assuming not many people are in New York, and we're all New York Staters, so we're focused almost entirely on the New York State law rather than New York City law. So some things to note about this law. So it was signed into law, I guess, in April 2018, and really this covers non-employees as well. So I think, I'm just going to highlight some of the things that I think are interesting and people need to know. So typically in the past, we thought of sexual harassment as one employee to another, a boss to a manager to a subordinate kind of thing, but really it extends now to everybody. So non-employees, so this could be 1099s, independent contractors. It could be the post office worker that comes into your office to deliver, or comes to, no one's coming into offices anymore, but it could be something along those lines. So really it touches a lot of different people, and they've broadened the definitions and who's covered and who needs to be kind of you know uh, protected here. So the other thing that it did in the past, just to highlight, in the past, if there was a sexual harassment suit brought against the company, right? And the the owner said, look, I disagree. I don't think it's something, but how do I fight this, right? And maybe their legal team would say, well, the best way to fight it would be give them some sort of settlement, and we all sign a non-disclosure that no one's gonna say anything, right? And that gave the owners, or the leaders of businesses, the impetus to settle cases, right, or to do something about them. Well, now non-disclosure agreements can only be agreed to by the party that's making the complaint. Uh, it so if the party doesn't want to sign a non-disclosure, this information could be made public and it could damage companies and all that stuff. So you want to be really aware that this law is really trending towards the employees and in their favor. And I don't think that's anything different than that we've seen in the past. And quite frankly, all of the changes that we'll talk about to the law kind of follow that same sort of thing. So then, starting in 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, in 2018, was mandatory distribution of model sexual harassment policies, and I'll show you a copy of that later. And then in January, that certain state bids, if any of you are bidding on government contracts, state contracts, some of them may require that you prove that you're addressing the policy, you've had your training, and you've updated your model anti-harassment policy in preferably your employee handbook. So the state is putting, and we've had instances where people were expecting a big check from the state. Hey, we did the work, we're expecting this check, and all of a sudden they get a letter that says, we're not paying you the rest of this money until you can prove that you have these things in place. So it's something to be aware of. It's something to be on the lookout for. I'm seeing some questions here, some chat questions. So I don't know if that's me or that's just people putting their information. Okay,
No,
great.
Rick, I'll take
Got
care of the chat. You
Okay,
do your
got it.
presentation.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, so the next, so so just some things to kind of, there's a lot of words on this screen, and part of what I wanted to do was just to highlight some things that are very important. And I'm going to go to uh, the middle one where it says the harassment need not be severe or pervasive in order for the employer to be liable. So typically in the past, one of the definitions of sexual harassment or harassment was that the behavior was severe and pervasive, meaning every time I walked into my boss's office, they were commenting on something, right? They were making jokes, they were doing something, they were, whatever they were doing, right? And it was a daily kind of grind. That's severe and pervasive. Well, that definition has now been removed, right? And the bar has been lowered for what is considered harassment, right? So it could be now I made a stupid comment, I made a joke, I did something that was just dumb, right? And now that could be construed as a level of harassment. So we want to make sure that we are very clear on what we're saying, how we're doing things, and that we're following. Um, I don't know. Let's call it the golden rule, because even more importantly now, it's important to follow that and be a good person no matter what. But I think that the opportunities for problems to arise are easier to pop up. And what I'll say about this is, when I started the business in 2010, we were in the depths of the Great Recession, right? And there was a problem. There's a lot of enforcement action by departments of labor, et cetera, and as well as actions of employees against employers. And the reason that, looking back on that time, that we saw that was because, right, jobs weren't available, right? So if I felt I was going to lose my job or get laid off or something was going wrong, and I looked at my finances, there's no other job for me to get, but I have to live, right? And I feel like my company was not treating me properly. There was a lot more action. There was a lot more triggers to the action. Additionally, the departments of labor and those other agencies, I'll just use departments of labor as the catch-all, they got very aggressive in fines and fees. And why was that? Really, it was around state budgets and budgets, right? So the budgets were blown because of all the money that were paid out during the Great Recession. So you can imagine. So the employer became the target of these two um, entities. Let's call it the employee side and let's call it the enforcement side. So it created a lot of strain on employers, and if they didn't have their systems and procedures buttoned up, they were basically sitting ducks. Well, I think we're seeing the same thing now, and what I'm going to say from living through 2010 or being a business owner at that point in time, what's going on now from the size of budgets that have been blown, right? The hole in those budgets, and the amount of job loss, right? And even though we're making strides, there's way more people out of work now than ever before, the last Great Recession. So in the last one, we had those two entities against, well, the problems that those two same entities are facing now are exponentially greater than in 2010. So I anticipate, and I'll talk about what I think and my opinions in the next few minutes. I anticipate that this sort of stuff, enforcement, uh, complaints, are going to increase as we go through. And I think Jerry was talking about this, the second wave and third wave, as things get more and more difficult for budgets from the states and local governments and employees losing jobs and not having the prospects of finding a new one. So that's kind of where I see it. Where am I? Sorry. So the next part of this is that the law keeps changing, right? And what I said earlier, I think that the law is never really changing in the employer's favor. It's changing in the employee's favor. And while you could take a time to read this, I think the bottom bullet point, effective August 12th, is there used to be a 1-year statute of limitations on making a sexual harassment complaint. Now it's 3 years, right? So really, you got to have good records, good things, because we all know Fred has them in the file cabinet behind his head. If you can't pull out the records and the reports from 3 years ago, that could be a problem if there is an issue that's. Thank you, Fred. Thanks for the prop. It's perfect. See, Fred has all the files from years ago in those cabinets in the back there. So it's important that you have a good record keeping system, and it's important that you have someone that's documenting things properly so that if it comes up, you can you can react to it. Then also, some human rights laws were broadened to cover companies that have less than 4 employees. So think about this: we're the Long Island Association of Small Business. Um, there are things that we need to be careful of as small business owners, and what's going on there. So I use this slide to illustrate that the law is continually being updated, and it's continually being updated not in the employer's favor and making it more and more difficult for them to comply, and make it more and more important for them to make sure that they're complying. Um, so I just want you to be aware of that. We expect more changes to this law. We expect, a lot more in the coming, 12 to 18 months. So what should every employer do, right, as required by the law? So the first thing that everyone should do is adopt the model anti-sexual harassment policy and distribute it and explain it to everyone in your organization or everyone who you pay. So if you're using 1099 contractors, them as well, right? Anyone that you pay, you should make sure that they have a copy of this policy and they know it. Now, there's two ways to do it. You can go on the website and pull down the model policy and just send it to people. That's okay. Our concept is that this should be model policy should be part of broader um, um, a broader package of policies and procedures to protect the business, and where we see that is the employee handbook. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the second thing that everyone should be doing right now, if you haven't done it, do it today, or do it in the next few days. If you haven't done it at all, it needs to be done for every employee or every person essentially you're paying every single year. So it's not like I did it in November 2019. Now I'm done. If you did it in November 2019, first off, good, but now it's time to do it. It's time to do it again. And also, any new employee in your organization, they need to be trained in what is termed a reasonable amount of time. So if you hire someone new, they say it's a reasonable amount of time they must be trained. We're using 30 to 60 days, and that's just our definition of what's a reasonable amount of time to get the employee trained. There's no real definition on that, and I think that that's designed in a certain way because employers are letting it slide. Now someone's 120 days into their employment, they have a problem, and they say, "Did you do the sexual harassment training?" No. Well, you didn't do it in a reasonable time. Well, what's a reasonable time? What we say it is, kind of thing. So we want to make sure that everyone has those two things. Um, so here's a copy of a model sexual harassment policy, right? These are the things that must be in it. But so I'll let you read that, and certainly this is available on the New York State Department of Labor website for you to get. So it's there, but um, every company in New York must have it and must meet these minimum standards. So I always use the analogy of WebMD, right? So you can certainly go get all of these things. You can certainly roll them all out yourself. But I use the model of WebMD, right? If anyone's ever gone on WebMD when you had a headache, right? I have a headache. Let me go on WebMD and see what's going on. Within about 10 minutes, for most of us, we're calling our families and saying, "It's been a great ride. I think I have a tumor in my brain," right? So it kind of drives us down to the lowest place because we're not doctors, right? Um, so I use that analogy because I think this is the same thing, right? If you go on the Department of Labor website, yes, you could do it. It's not a problem. But like the WebMD, you start reading and you go, "Oh my God, oh my gosh, oh my God, what went wrong?" So if you need help, give us a call, right? I don't want, you should be focused on growing your business, driving revenue, and not dealing with this. That's kind of what we in firms like ours and Gary's are here for. The next thing, what are the training requirements, right? So, just some things. It has to be interactive, right? And there's different definitions of interactive. They have a specific format. I'm not going to go through all of these things. You can read it as you go along. They have a specific format of what needs to check off the box, right? And then and what needs to be included in that training. So the old days of just that cheesy video that was put out 30 years ago is not going to cut it, right? So it has to be a less cheese now. So it has to be so it has to have certain requirements that it has to meet. It has to be so you want to make sure that when you do this training, if you're going to do it yourself, that it's meeting these model requirements, or you bring in a firm that knows how to do it properly and all that sort of stuff. All right, so just kind of from a time perspective, just kind of wrap it through, then I'll open up to questions. So while there's no penalty right now for non-compliance, right? There's no police that's going to knock on your door and say, let us see your sexual harassment training records and et cetera. There's no penalty right now. However, what there is if there is a problem and you as a company have not complied, there is no mercy, right? We've seen a lot of this where there's been a complaint against someone, the state comes in, the EEOC, various agencies, and they say, let's show us your model policy and show us your training records. And they say, oh, we don't have that. There is no, I didn't know, there's nothing. The pendulum on this is swung all, depending on which way you look at it, all the way in one direction. And that direction is in the no, I'm going to call it the no mercy direction. So please make sure that you have these things, make sure that your clients have them, all that sort of stuff. As I mentioned earlier, the laws and its requirements will likely be amended and updated, and it's not anticipated that those amendments will be in the employer's favor, right? They're not going to make it easier. They're not going to lessen the burden on employers. In fact, we think, our opinion again, is that it's going to get harder for the employer to comply with more requirements on the employer. And then finally, we anticipate additional training requirements will be added at some time in the near future. So subjects such as diversity training, unconscious bias, and other topics related to diversity in the workplace. So, the sexual harassment law was in response to the Me Too movement and what was going on with Harvey Weinstein and others and all that stuff at that time, right? And what's going on now with social unrest and all those sorts of things, I think is affecting the world, the country, and the workplace, even a magnitude of 10, right? So if New York State implemented training for one section, we anticipate similar things on diversity training and unconscious bias and those sorts of things. Additionally, which is not on here, as the big elephant in the room, COVID-19. um, how that's affecting employers. Look how it's affecting all of us right now. We would be in a room in Hauppauge, but right now we're together on Zoom. So the effects on business leaders and what we're doing and how we're doing it, we think that there's going to be, again, additional training requirements around COVID-19 over the next 12 to 18 months. So let's just think of it this way. It used to be we would go into an office and that's where things happened. But if you think about this now, I'm in your house and you're right now in my house, right? There's a whole different set of things. Like I saw James, someone walk by his desk before, right? There's a whole different set of things and that are affecting employees and employers and how we work. And we're anticipating that training will be developed and required because of that. So those are just things that we're looking at in the near future. So what are the two most important things that any business owner should do, or any leader, or advise their clients? A is to have a handbook. If they don't have, if they have a handbook, to have it updated. Excuse me. And if they do have one, that it should be reviewed and updated. So we anticipate a lot of changes in the next 24 months, as I've highlighted. And that document, the handbook, the most important thing that we propose to everybody is that it's a live, living handbook, right? And what I mean by that is, if you write a handbook today, it's not like the old days and every 2 years you'd review it. Now the speed with which laws are changing are just almost daily. So if your handbook is not what we call a live handbook, and it's not automatically updated to accommodate any new federal or state policies, it's almost not even worth the paper it's written on the day you write it. So we call it a live handbook. We could talk about that. If anyone has questions on that, we could chat later. And then the next thing that I would say is get trained. So provide online sexual harassment and discrimination training for you and your employees. As I mentioned before, we've done over 12,000 employees since the inception of this law using this online model. So if anyone has questions there. Uh, so the offer that and I'm wrapping up here. So this is exclusive to the members. So I mentioned the living handbook. If anyone needs a handbook, a living handbook, um, um, which means every time it's updated, we will do it for anyone. Anyone is an LAISB member at a discounted rate. I don't care the size of your company. If you have 2 employees, 3 employees, or 300 employees, it's important to have a proper policy document. And then finally is the sexual harassment using our online learning management system. If anyone needs training, I reduced the rate by 33%. So if anyone needs it, whether you're 1, 2, 3, 4 employees, whatever it is, highest recommendation is that everyone get the training completed. If they need help, just let us know. And with that, I thank you and hope that I stayed on the timeline.
You did, but now we're going to open it up for Q&A. And thank you very much, Rick. That was a very informative presentation. And as I said, this is has been recorded and will be available on our website um, in the coming week. All right. So let me just do one thing here.